Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. Your metal doesn't pay the fare. The words sliced through the winter air. The business suit with the $1,000 watch didn't even look at the old man's face, just at the worn military tag in his trembling hands. Around them, the bus shelter fell silent. Passengers stared at their phones, pretending not to notice as the veteran's weathered face flushed with shame. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. That's when the hooded figure at the back of the line looked up. The downtown bus stop huddled against the February chill, steam rising from grates as headlights cut through early evening darkness. The veteran stood motionless, his dignity hanging by a thread as worn as his coat. He'd walked 3 miles already, but the VA appointment across town couldn't wait. The businessman sighed dramatically, tapping his Italian leather shoe. "Some of us have places to be," he announced to no one and everyone. The line of passengers shifted uncomfortably, collars turned up against more than just the cold. The bus driver, trapped behind his plexiglass shield, pretended to check his schedule. Rules were rules. No fare, no ride. The businessman smirked, enjoying his moment of public superiority. "Maybe next time spend less on booze," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. The veteran's eyes dropped to the concrete, his lips pressed tight against words earned in battles this suited man would never understand. That's when the hooded figure stepped forward, sunglasses coming off, revealing eyes the world recognized from a dozen blockbuster films. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. Robert Downey Jr. moved with the casual confidence that came from walking red carpets and commanding film sets. Yet there was nothing rehearsed about this moment. His presence rippled through the line like an electric current. A woman gasped softly. Someone whispered his name. But Downey's focus remained on the exchange he'd witnessed, on the veteran whose weathered hands clutched the military ID tag like an anchor to his worth. The businessman registered the change in atmosphere before he recognized the cause. He turned, prepared to dismiss another interruption, but the practiced annoyance froze on his face. Recognition hit him like a physical force. He straightened his tie, his expression cycling rapidly between shock, embarrassment, and an attempt at recovery. "Evening," Downey said, his voice carrying the same quiet intensity that had delivered a decade of iconic lines. But this wasn't Tony Stark's rehearsed charisma. This was something raw, something real. The veteran stood straighter almost by instinct, the way men who've served still respond to presence and authority decades after leaving uniform. His eyes, which had been downcast, now took in the actor with quiet assessment. There was no starstruck awe, just the dignified acknowledgement of one man to another. The businessman, meanwhile, had found his voice, though it emerged higher than he'd intended. "Robert Downey Jr.? Man, I'm a huge fan. Iron Man changed everything." He extended his hand as though the previous minutes could be erased by celebrity enthusiasm. Downey glanced at the offered hand but didn't take it. Instead, he nodded toward the veteran. "Couldn't help overhearing. Seems like we've got a situation." His tone was conversational but carried an undercurrent that made phones lower and ears perk up. The businessman's hand slowly retreated, his smile faltering at the edges. Around them, the bus shelter had become a stage, passengers now an attentive audience to this unexpected drama unfolding in their mundane evening commute. "Just a misunderstanding," the businessman said quickly, his earlier arrogance dissolving under Downey's steady gaze. "The rules are clear about fares." He gestured vaguely toward the fare chart posted on the shelter wall, as if policy could shield him from moral judgment. The veteran remained silent, dignity intact despite the public spectacle he'd become the center of. His weathered face betrayed little emotion, but his knuckles had whitened around the military tag. Years of discipline kept his back straight despite the humiliation. "Rules matter," Downey agreed, stepping closer. "So does respect." He removed his hood completely now, revealing himself fully to the growing crowd. Several phones were recording discreetly, their owners sensing that something worth sharing was unfolding. The bus driver peered through his window, schedule forgotten. Even the city traffic seemed to slow around them, as though the universe itself was pausing to witness this collision of worlds. Hollywood royalty, corporate privilege, and military honor converging at a forgotten downtown bus stop. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. "Sir," Downey addressed the veteran directly, deliberately turning his back on the businessman, "may I ask where you served?" The question came with genuine interest, not performative courtesy. The actor's own well-documented journey through adversity had left him with authentic respect for those who'd faced battles of their own. The veteran cleared his throat, voice emerging rough but clear. "Marines. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq." He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. 6 words that contained worlds of experience. Downey nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Thank you for your service." 4 simple words, but delivered with such sincerity that they carried weight beyond the often empty phrase. He turned slightly, including the businessman in his field of vision again. "How much is the fare?" The businessman shifted his weight, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the dynamics of power had reshuffled around him. "It's $5, he said, the words coming out defensive. "Everyone has to pay. It's not about the money, it's the principle." The veteran's jaw tightened. "My wallet was stolen yesterday. Got my ID back from the police, but not the cash. My appointment at the VA is across town." He offered this explanation not as an excuse but as simple fact, his pride evident in every syllable. Downey reached for his wallet, but his gesture wasn't merely about the $5. It was about restoration, of dignity, of respect, of a balance that had tilted too far in the wrong direction. The businessman, sensing the narrative forming around him, a narrative where he was clearly cast as the villain, attempted to recover. "Look, I'll pay it," he interjected, pulling out a sleek money clip. "I didn't know about the stolen wallet situation." His voice carried the forced magnanimity of someone trying to write themselves back into heroism. Downey paused, his eyes meeting the businessman's with quiet intensity. "That's generous of you now," he said, each word measured. "But I think the issue runs deeper than the fare." Around them, the audience had grown. Phones captured the exchange from multiple angles. Tomorrow, this would be viewed millions of times, dissected in comment sections across social media platforms. The veteran stood perfectly still, a man accustomed to being caught in crossfires. "I don't need charity," he said quietly, "and I don't need a scene. I just need to get to my appointment." The bus rumbled toward the stop, hydraulics hissing as it prepared to open its doors. Time was compressing, forcing confrontation into resolution. The businessman, reading the room, attempted damage control. "Sir," he addressed the veteran with newly discovered respect, "please allow me to apologize. My behavior was completely unacceptable." The words sounded rehearsed, a corporate apology crafted for minimum liability. "Let me cover your fare as a small token of appreciation for your service." Downey watched this performance with the eye of someone who'd spent a career distinguishing authentic emotion from scripted lines. He turned to the veteran, his voice lowered, though still audible to those nearby. "Your call, sir. Whatever you're comfortable with." The veteran studied the businessman, decades of life experience informing his assessment. The bus doors opened with a pneumatic sigh. The driver looked out expectantly at the gathering, schedule now completely abandoned. Everyone waited for the veteran's decision, understanding that something more significant than a bus fare hung in the balance. "I appreciate the offer," the veteran finally said, his voice steady, "but I think there's a more valuable payment you could make." His weathered fingers closed around the dog tag. "Not to me, to the men and women still serving." The businessman blinked, caught off guard by this pivot. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman whispered, "Oh, this is good." A man nodded silently in agreement. Downey's expression remained neutral, but a hint of appreciation flickered in his eyes. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. The businessman's expression cycled through confusion, realization, and then a calculated assessment of his options. The crowd around them had grown silent, the collective inhale before judgment. The entire bus shelter had transformed into a courtroom of public opinion, and he was moments from sentencing. "What did you have in mind?" he asked, trying to project willing generosity instead of cornered desperation. The veteran straightened further, years of military bearing evident in his posture. "The VA hospital where I'm headed is full of men and women who gave pieces of themselves for this country. Some gave limbs. Some gave peace of mind. All of them deserve better than what they're getting." Downey stepped slightly aside, giving the veteran the full spotlight. This wasn't his scene to steal. The actor's own journey through addiction and redemption had taught him when to be the star and when to be supporting cast. Right now, the veteran had the floor. "I volunteer there 3 days a week," the veteran continued. "We're always short on everything. Books, magazines, computer time, basic comforts." His voice remained level, not pleading, but stating facts. "Your watch would fund our recreation room for a year." The businessman instinctively touched his watch, a Patek Philippe that had cost more than some people's cars. His face flushed. "That's a bit extreme," he said, voice strained. "I'm happy to make a donation, but, you know," Downey interrupted, his voice carrying that distinctive timbre that had delivered countless memorable lines, "I've found that our most uncomfortable moments often lead to our greatest growth." He wasn't playing a character now. This was the authentic voice of a man who had fallen and risen, who had learned valuable lessons about humility and redemption. The bus driver called out, "We need to get moving, folks." The moment of decision had arrived. The businessman looked around at the faces watching him, some openly recording, others pretending not to stare. His reputation, perhaps his identity, hung in the balance. He could feel the narrative forming around him, villain or redeemed. His fingers moved to his watch clasp. "I can't give my watch," he said finally. Around him, expressions hardened, disappointment palpable. "But," he continued, pulling out his phone, "I can do this?" He pulled up his banking app, tapped several times, then turned the screen toward the veteran. $10,000. Right now. To the VA hospital program of your choice." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. The veteran's weathered face remained composed, betraying little beyond a slight widening of his eyes. He studied the phone screen, then looked up at the businessman's face, assessing the sincerity behind the gesture. "The PTSD therapy program," he said finally. "They're doing good work, but they're always short on funding." He provided the details with military precision while the businessman completed the transaction. Downey watched silently, neither approving nor condemning the resolution. When the businessman finished the transfer and showed the confirmation, the actor stepped forward again, addressing both men. "Gentlemen," he said, "our bus is waiting." He extended his arm toward the open doors. a gesture that somehow contained both Hollywood flourish and genuine respect. To the veteran, he added, "Would you allow me to accompany you to your appointment? I've been meaning to visit the VA hospital myself." The veteran regarded him for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture between equals. The businessman, sensing his role in this drama concluding, stepped back slightly. "Thank you for your service," he said to the veteran, the words carrying more weight than when he'd first arrived at the bus stop. The veteran acknowledged this with a slight nod before boarding the bus, Downey beside him. The businessman remained behind, watching them go, his expression unreadable as the doors closed. Around him, phones lowered, their footage already beginning to travel across the digital landscape. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." Inside the bus, passengers pretended not to stare as Robert Downey Jr. and the veteran took seats near the middle. The actor had replaced his sunglasses but made no other attempt to hide his identity. He spoke quietly with the veteran, their conversation private despite the public setting. Occasionally, the older man would nod or offer a brief response, his military reserve gradually easing. By the time they reached the VA hospital stop, the first clips of the bus stop encounter were already trending. Respect veterans and Downey delivers were climbing social media charts, accompanied by fragmented videos showing different angles of the confrontation and resolution. Outside the hospital entrance, Downey paused. "I meant what I said about visiting," he told the veteran, "but this is your appointment. I don't want to create a distraction." The veteran considered this, then extended his hand. James Conroy, Marine Corps, retired. The introduction was simple, direct, offering his name only after measuring the actor's character. "Robert," the actor replied, shaking the hand firmly, "it's an honor, James." No pretense, no celebrity flourish, just one man's respect for another. 2 days later, the businessman, now identified by internet sleuths as Edward Mercer, VP at a downtown financial firm, issued a formal statement. He expressed deep regret for his behavior and announced a matching donation program for veteran services, challenging his corporate colleagues to contribute. The statement was carefully worded, clearly crafted by a PR team, yet contained glimmers of genuine reflection. The VA hospital received an unexpected flood of donations, far exceeding the initial $10,000. Volunteer applications tripled. Local news crews arrived to cover the story, capturing footage of the recreation room where James Conroy volunteered 3 days a week. Robert Downey Jr. made no public statement about the incident. His publicist responded to inquiries with only, "Robert believes private moments of respect should remain private." This diplomatic non-comment only fueled further positive press. When Downey did visit the VA hospital a week later, he arrived without cameras or entourage, just a man honoring a commitment made at a bus stop. Hospital staff reported that he spent 3 hours talking with veterans, listening more than speaking, learning about their challenges and victories. 1 month after the bus stop encounter, a small ceremony took place in the newly renovated recreation room of the VA hospital. James Conroy cut a simple ribbon, flanked by fellow veterans. There was no Hollywood star present. Downey had declined the invitation with respectful regrets, but his contribution was acknowledged on a modest plaque beside the door. The video had accumulated over 20 million views across platforms. Comment sections overflowed with personal stories from veterans and their families, creating digital communities of support and advocacy. Several celebrities had picked up the cause, leveraging their platforms to highlight veteran services in their own communities. Edward Mercer arrived at the ceremony without fanfare, standing quietly at the back in a suit less ostentatious than the one he'd worn that February evening. When approached by a local reporter, he shook his head and gestured toward Conroy. "This isn't about me," he said simply. "Some lessons cost more than others. This one was worth every penny. As for James Conroy, he continued his volunteer work with the same quiet dignity he'd shown that cold evening at the bus stop. When asked about the incident that had changed so many lives, including his own, he would offer only the same understated wisdom that had guided him through combat and civilian life alike. Respect isn't bought with money or fame. It's earned through actions, every single day. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think. You'll help us grow if you'll subscribe and get notifications on. And don't stop here. Click one of the videos on your screen and keep the journey going. See you in the next one.